You once believed that heaven was the final reward, but what you are about to hear will transform that definition completely. It is no longer a distant destination waiting for you in some far-off future, but a state you can inhabit now. Each part of this journey is a doorway into your own depths, where time stands still and presence becomes the key. This is not theory. It is a living reality, accessible the moment you are awake enough to remember rather than to seek. Read this not to gain more understanding, but to release the layers of what you are. No longer, for freedom does not come when you know more. It comes when you stop defending the version of yourself that no longer serves you. And in that moment, you will no longer need a miracle, because you are the miracle already walking. You thought you were searching, but most people are only circling a memory that was never lost. They call it longing. They call it dreaming. They call it the future. But all of it is merely the mind trying to define something that has always been there, silent and whole. No one looks for light in the middle of the day. Only those who have forgotten. They are living in light, exhaust themselves, chasing fire. And this is the familiar tragedy of the modern soul. When man loses the silence within and begins to believe that truth lies somewhere ahead, behind or outside, but no path can lead you to what already belongs to you. No one needs to become what they already are. Every effort to attain it is just another form of forgetting. You have not fallen off the path. You simply stopped remembering that you are the path. The ending you thought was a reward for a painful journey is, in truth, only the return, and returning never demands effort. It only asks you to stop resisting, to stop proving what has always been true, to stop ignoring the quiet call from the deepest part of you. What you call intuition, good feeling, or unnamed yearning is really the echo of yourself from the other side of time. When you see it, it is not because you have gone far enough, but because you have stopped going the wrong way. All true transformation begins with a vague memory and gradually becomes clear, like light breaking through fog. Nothing new is ever created. Only the old is undone. There is no goal to reach, only a clarity waiting to be reawakened. And not all longing is lack. Some longings are reminders. They do not demand more. They reduce you back to what is real. When you feel an urge you cannot explain, it is the voice within knocking on the shell outside. When you no longer feel the need to run, that is when you begin to come home. The secret is not in what you do to the world. The secret is that the world begins to shift when you remember who you are, not because you have proven yourself, but because you have stopped playing the role of someone who lacks. The ending is not a prize. It is the foundation buried beneath the stories. You tell yourself, when those stories fall away, the ending does not appear as a triumph, but simply as what has always been. People often ask how to know if they are on the right path. The answer does not lie in outer evidence, but in the depth of the silence within. When you remember, you no longer hurry, not because you no longer care, but because you no longer doubt. And silence now is not emptiness. It is the voice of truth, a truth that does not need to shout. It only needs to be allowed to appear. The mind demands reasons, but the soul only needs clarity. The mind wants to know why, when, and how, but the soul only asks, do you still doubt? And when doubt fades, everything begins to fall into place. Not because you are manipulating reality, but because you have stopped creating resistance. You do not need to create wholeness. You only need to stop denying it. There is no bridge to build to the destination, only an inner clearing that lets you realize you are already standing there. Remembering requires no theory. It only demands the courage to release familiar illusions. Truth never hurts. What hurts is the attachment to the false. When you stop clinging to what is no longer true, what is true will reveal itself, not because you have become worthy, but because you have stopped rejecting it. You cannot live in light while insisting you are still searching. You cannot taste the sweetness of completion while clinging to the identity of someone who is not enough. Remembering is a silent resolve, not loud, not showy. It does not arrive with thunder, but with a deep breath, not as an answer, but as the absence of questions. You do not need to convince anyone. You do not need to prove yourself to the world. You only need to live as someone who has seen, because the truth is, you have seen before. That vision has never disappeared. It has only been dusted over with too many reasons to doubt. But dust does not erase the light. It only covers it temporarily. And once you choose to stop wiping the mirror with the hand of doubt, the image will return intact and radiant. As in the beginning, you are not learning to create heaven. You are remembering that heaven is your home, not a destination, but a route, not something to earn, but something that has never left you. And that is the beginning of freedom, not because you have been granted permission, but because you have stopped imprisoning yourself in the belief that you must attain it. When you stop seeking, you begin to see, not because the world has changed, but because you have returned to the place you never truly left. No more steps are needed, only a pause in the right place, the place where you have never ceased to be yourself. Truth does not lie in the future. It is a state you can access in the present. If you no longer believe that truth belongs to some distant future, then what reason is left for you to delay living fully right now? This question is not meant to make you feel guilty, but to awaken the realization that you are holding a power most of your life has been used to forget. You do not need to attain the truth. You only need to stop avoiding it, for truth is not ahead of you. It is here, present in every breath, every choice, every heartbeat you are listening to right now. Truth is not something to be earned through effort or perfection. It does not arrive as a reward for months of discipline or correct alignment. It is a frequency, and frequency requires no conditions. It only needs to be allowed. What you call not yet arrived is merely what you have not chosen to live with. The future holds no answers. The present is the only place where you have full authority to establish reality. Every form of waiting is a subtle kind of denial. When you say, "One day I will feel complete," you are telling the universe that you are lacking now. When you promise yourself that once things are better, you will find peace, you are placing an external condition on something that has always belonged inside. But the nature of truth is that it does not wait. It does not follow the timeline of events. It does not need a script to show up. It only needs a mind still enough to recognize it and a heart honest enough to stop postponing it. If you believe light only comes after darkness retreats, you have misunderstood the nature of light. Light does not come later. It is always here. It is you who have covered your own eyes with layers of belief, expectation, and outdated stories. When you push truth into the future, you also push yourself out of the center of power, because truth cannot operate from a place of delay. It can only function when you stop and stand within it. So the question is, what are you postponing? Postponing to live as who? Postponing what has long been calling you while you keep stepping back, waiting for another sign. The subtlest form of postponement is when you do not realize you are doing it. When you keep acting, keep praying, keep growing, but all of it serves only to keep a safe distance from a reality already complete. And the danger is, the longer the delay continues, the more you believe It is part of the process. But truth does not need time to be right. It has been right even when you doubted it. You do not make truth real by believing in it. You only need to stop agreeing with what is false. The sooner you see this, the sooner the cycle ends, because every thought that says not yet creates a dimension where what you desire is locked away, not by the world, but by your unconscious choice. Take a moment to look at your life and ask, from where am I living? From an incomplete version, from a mind still seeking validation, or from a place where truth has always been whole? That question does not need words. For an answer, it speaks through the frequency you emit each day. And what cannot be denied is this: the world always reflects not what you hope for, but what you choose to live as real. Are you willing to lay down the old story and step into the state where nothing needs to be fixed? Are you brave enough to live as someone who remembers, even if the evidence out there has not yet caught up? This is not a game of belief. It is an emotional migration from lack to fullness, from waiting to receiving, from becoming to embodying. And right now, in the silence between these lines, I want to ask you, not as a preacher, but as a true companion, are you ready to live as someone who has already arrived? Not to answer me, but to listen to yourself. Because if something is stirring within you at this moment, it is not curiosity, it is memory. If you are reading these words, I know you are not merely a listener. You are someone who remembers, not for the first time, but once again. And this time, perhaps you will not forget. Thank you. Not for listening, but for being present. There is no gift greater than presence. For in presence, all truth finds its way home. Time is not absolute order. It is not a one-way stream that carries everything from beginning to end, as we have long misunderstood. Time is a tool that measures the transformation of form, but it cannot touch essence. And the painful truth is that humanity has become trapped inside the very tool it created. People believe that truth must follow a chain of conditions, that peace is a reward for effort, that results only come when time has been sufficient. But truth is not bound by time. It does not wait for enough years to become real. It only waits for you to stop agreeing with the false. Every inner transformation requires only a single moment of awareness, just one decisive choice, and the entire past loses its power to continue. But the mind is so used to defining itself through time that it refuses to let go. It says, just a little more, just one more piece of evidence, one more sign, one amore fase. It pulls you into a loop, making you believe that evolution is a climb up the ladder of time. But depth is not found in years. It is found in clarity within each moment. You do not need more time to become. You only need to step outside the frame of time, not by fighting it, but by seeing through it. As long as you believe it is not yet time, your entire frequency transmits delay, not because you are unworthy, but because you have not yet agreed to receive. Every time you push truth into the future, you unconsciously declare that the present is lacking. And the law does not operate on words, it operates on state. Time makes you believe that you need to travel farther to be complete. But essence knows no distance. Love does not grow by the year. Clarity does not require waiting. Light does not arrive because darkness has lasted long enough. It only asks that you withdraw your agreement with darkness. And when you do, time collapses like a structure with no operator. Every image you have ever held in your mind of success, peace, or freedom already exists as a seed. You are not going toward it. You are gradually living with it. No need to build a bridge. Only live as one who has already arrived. You cannot escape time by waiting longer. The only thing that moves you beyond the linear order is absolute presence. In presence, there is no before or after. There is only clarity. Time makes you think the present is a stepping stone, not a destination. But when you stand in the present as if there is nothing left to fix, time is emptied. It no longer has a purpose. And when time loses its function, the mind loses its control. At that moment, instead of being the keeper of the clock, you become the embodiment of a movement that no longer needs to be measured. And that is why time is addictive. It allows the ego to prolong the illusion of control. It tells you that you still have time, or that you are already late, or that you are ahead of others. But truth does not compare. It does not ask you to catch up. It does not praise you for being early. It only asks whether you are still attached to the idea of arriving, or whether you are willing to live as one who is already there. All religions have pointed to this. Heaven does not come at the end of life. It has been in you from the beginning. Buddha nature does not await after 1,000 lifetimes. It is the foundation of every breath, but the modern mind has forgotten how to live in a state without goals. It is used to marking, categorizing, turning every emotion, every action, every awakening into a process. It does not see that essence is not found in process, but in the dimension that transcends it. You do not need more days and months to return home. You only need to stop and place your feet down, right here, right now. No more proving, no more checking, no more listing. Whether you are ready or not, only agreement with what already is. And what already is does not arrive through reasoning. It arrives through surrender. Surrender the idea that you must change to be enough. Surrender the belief that truth needs to be shaped by time. Surrender the definition that transformation must follow a sequence of steps. Transformation has no step 1, 2, or 3. Transformation begins when you no longer need a step at all. When you stop counting, the light begins to clarify, not because it was just turned on, but because you are no longer burying yourself beneath layers of inner scheduling. And presence does not require you to sit still. It only asks that you stop running within, stop turning each day into a run, each month into a measurement, each year into a certificate of growth. Nothing guarantees your evolution. By the amount of time you have passed, only the honesty within each moment is the true measure. Transcending time is not about abandoning the world. It is about no longer letting the world decide when you are allowed to be yourself. When you go beyond time, you lose nothing. You only let fall the watches tied to other people's wrists. And when your hands are no longer bound to ticking minutes, you are free to grasp the only thing that has never changed, that you were always enough from the beginning, and that truth does not need time to become real. It only needs you to stop delaying. There is no action more powerful than the one that arises from the state of completion. When you walk as if what you desire has already been given, you shift the current of reality itself. Your heart is no longer a place of longing, but a place of confirmation. Your thoughts cease to be strategies and become harmony, and your actions are no longer means to an end, but natural expressions of what already is. Most people act in order to reach something. They believe that if they try hard enough, stay persistent, follow the right path, then one day the result will arrive. But action born from lack can only recreate a reality of lack. When you act because you do not yet have, you are affirming absence, and the law does not respond to words, but to the state from which your action flows. You do not come closer to your goal by trying to shrink the distance. You collapse the distance by acting as one who no longer has any distance to cross. And this is not fantasy, this is law. Every step taken from a state of sufficiency pulls the future into the present. Every word spoken from unwavering faith is a bell that calls the unseen into form. And when your inner frequency stabilizes, reality has no choice but to respond. Ask yourself honestly, where are you acting from? From a fear that if you do nothing, everything will fall apart. From a quiet doubt that maybe you are not the chosen one, or from the stillness of one who has remembered their inherent wholeness. That answer does not need to be spoken. It resounds in the smallest choices you make, in how you answer the phone, in how you greet the morning, in how you enter a room and leave behind silence. No one in love asks, how do I prove that I am in love? They need no strategy. They need no confirmation. They are love in motion. And in the same way, one who lives from the end does not need to check. They do not look around for signs. They are the sign, not because they are special, but because they have stopped denying. When you act as if what you chose has already been ordained, the world ceases to resist, not because you overpowered it, but because you stop distorting it with conflicting frequencies. This is why action from the end holds the power to shift reality. It is not a formula for control. It is the embodiment that makes what is right impossible to delay. If you truly choose to live from the end, then every step you take carries the energy of one who needs no convincing, no justifying, no rushing, not because you are proud, but because you no longer doubt. In that moment, your actions become sound waves knocking on the doors of possibilities that have long waited, and the doors open not because you begged, but because you spoke the exact code. And now I ask you to pause for a moment, not to agree, but to listen to yourself. Are you ready to walk as if what you chose is already true? No permission needed, no confirmation from the world, only a silent agreement inside you. And if somewhere within a quiet voice has whispered, it is time, then let it rise. Let me see that you are here, that you are listening not just to me, but to yourself. Leave a comment that says, I am ready to change, or simply type the number 1, a small signal, yet rich with meaning, because it only takes one person remembering, and the entire space around them begins to change. Thank you, not for reading to the end, but for having the courage to sit with the question. That is not always easy. Where am I acting from? Not as a concept, but as your actual emotional reality. And if the deepest part of you replies, I am ready to live from the end, then this is no longer action. This is evidence. And your presence in this moment is the very answer the world has been waiting for. Reality is not shaped by circumstances, but by the frequency you hold consistently. Everything you call my life is in fact the delayed echo of the information field you silently emit. No situation is random. No result is sudden. Every outward expression is the outcome of an internal signal repeated long enough to become solid. Frequency is not a fleeting emotion. It is the subtle agreement between feeling, thought, and belief repeated so often each day that you hardly notice it. You may say you desire peace, but if your default inner state is tension, then your vibrational wave is telling a different story. You may repeat affirmations about abundance, but if your deepest feeling remains anxiety and doubt, then the message you are sending is still one of lack. The law does not respond to the surface. It responds to depth. It does not hear words. It hears frequency. Frequency cannot be faked. You cannot fool reality with calculated actions or expressions crafted to manipulate. What is most deeply emitted is what is most clearly received. Any misalignment reveals itself as delay, repetition, or disconnection. This is not punishment. This is precision. When you do not live fully within the frequency you wish to receive, all surface effort becomes a faint echo in the void of inner incoherence. If you feel like you are doing everything right and the results still have not come, look again, not at the actions, but at the frequency behind them. What are you transmitting in your default state when no one is watching? How do you react when things spiral out of control? And what story plays in your mind when life goes quiet? Because it is in those moments, not in your performative positivity, that the foundation of your frequency is heard by the universe. Your frequency of being is the space you live in before anything appears. It is the air you breathe without knowing, yet it permeates every word you speak, every choice you make, every person you draw in. When your frequency becomes clear, you no longer seek validation. You become the gravitational center, not because you stand out, but because you are stable. And in a chaotic world, stability has more pull than noise. You do not need to have everything to emit a complete frequency. You only need to live as if doubt is no longer in you. No performance needed. No display required. Simply allow your mind, heart, and action to flow as one coherent current. Then you will not need to force transformation. You will only need to hold it long enough until reality has no choice but to catch up. Frequency is the language before language. It precedes behavior, bypasses time, and is unaffected by conditions. You can remain still and still change the world around you simply by tuning the signal that flows from within. This is not easy, for it demands honesty to the core. No decoration, no self-deception. Only absolute transparency allows strong frequency to remain undistorted, and in holding that frequency, doors begin to open, not because you knocked harder, but because you became the one the door was always meant for. When you dwell steadily in the right frequency, you do not need to persuade life to give you anything. Life is not rejecting you. It has simply never received a clear signal, and now that the frequency is aligned, reality begins to answer. Everything you once dreamed of is not a reward. It is a resonance. If you have not touched it, it is not because it is not ready. It is because your signal has not yet been recognized. And the beauty is, you do not need to fabricate the frequency. You only need to remove the layers that distort it. When you no longer use fear to build strategy, when you stop using control to simulate safety, what remains is the pure essence that has always emitted the right signal. Reality does not need to be manipulated. It only needs to be reminded by a clear signal, and that signal does not lie in promises. It lies in the frequency you live as, not only when things are easy, but even in silence, in uncertainty, when no result is visible, when you remain stable, even when nothing has changed. That is the very moment reality begins to change, not because you forced it to listen, but because you stopped interfering with yourself. And the silence of a precise frequency is always the loudest sound in every room. Faith is not a fragile hope that one day everything will be better. Faith is not a denial of hardship, not the act of closing your eyes to what is truly unfolding. Faith is the unwavering presence in the center of conflict without being shaken. It is the gaze that does not flinch when storms rise. It is the breath that remains steady when circumstances shift. It is a stillness that does not come from reassurance, but from an inner ground that cannot be moved. People often think that to have faith means to always feel at peace, that if they truly believe, Fear will vanish, doubt will disappear, worry will dissolve, but that is only true on the surface. In its depth, faith is the ability to meet reality fully without losing connection to the invisible. It is the power to see clearly everything that is not yet as you wish, yet remain untouched by the pull of lack. Faith does not chase away the darkness. It simply keeps the lamp burning until the light takes back the room. Not through avoidance, but through the certainty of where you stand. You do not need to feel strong to have faith. You do not need to feel perfectly stable. You do not even need to be sure. You only need to remain with the choice you made within, even when emotions rise and fall, even when results remain unclear, even when the world outside offers evidence to the contrary. Faith does not claim that circumstances will change immediately. Faith only says, I have chosen where I stand, and I will not move. And it is in that remaining that the sacred begins to show itself, not as a dramatic miracle, but as a quiet atmosphere that softens the storms, not because the outside world has become easier, but because there is no longer any space within you for darkness to hide. Faith needs no soothing. It needs no recognition. It is a silent presence that cannot be shaken. Sometimes faith stands like a mountain in the middle of life, but other times faith is simply a single finger that refuses to let go of what is right. It is a simple phrase repeating inwardly, I will not withdraw. It is one deep breath before you react. It is one step forward that asks for no proof. It is these small things that build the shelter in the storm, and that is why faith needs not conquer anyone, needs not defeat any circumstance. It only needs to be held like a flame that will not go out. When you understand this nature, you will stop using faith as a tool to negotiate results. You will stop bargaining with faith to gain a more comfortable life, because true faith is not a method to obtain. It is the essence of one who understands that all things have already been given. You do not need to earn more to be worthy. You only need to stop betraying what you already know is true, even when nothing yet confirms it, and then you will see faith does not take you away from reality. It does not lift you out of life. It brings you back, but with a different gaze. You no longer see reality as the enemy. You no longer need to avoid it. You no longer need to embellish it. You enter life with feet grounded, but a mind unconfined. And it is this combination that creates a field of presence that can heal. No preaching required, no persuasion necessary, just presence. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. It is not an external sound, but a quiet chamber within, where you no longer flee, no longer sit, only return to the one thing that has never left you. And once you return, you no longer need to protect anything. You no longer need to prove what you believe is true. Because when you live from the place of knowing, every question dissolves into peace. Remember, faith is not a passing feeling in a sacred ceremony. It is a state of being. It is the breath you hold in silence. It is the decision not to retreat each time the waves rise. It is the habit of one who no longer needs certainty to move forward. And such faith needs no loud voice. It only needs a continual choice, quiet and unshakable. That is when you no longer need to look up for miracles, because you realize you are the ground where the sacred is revealed, and you live as one who has seen, who knows, who understands. No prediction required, no evidence needed, only the life of one who has come home. And when you hold that faith, you do not just change outcomes, you change the very atmosphere you step into. not because you impose anything, but because your presence has become a wordless affirmation, an affirmation that light has never disappeared. It has only been waiting for someone still enough to let it rise from within. To step into a new frequency, you cannot carry the old identity with you. You cannot hold on to old patterns of reaction, old ways of defining yourself, old fears long protected, and at the same time expect a different reality to appear. The first thing that must be released is not your circumstance, but the idea of who you thought you were. You cannot remain the one who was wounded and simultaneously live as someone who is free. You cannot keep replaying the same old story in your mind and then wonder why reality has not changed. A new frequency requires a new self, and that self only emerges when you are willing to lay down the shell you have mistaken for yourself. Your old identity is not something you were born with. It is a structure formed by habitual reactions, reinforced fears, unresolved experiences, and the labels others once placed on you that you unconsciously accepted. Every time you think, I've always been this way, I am too sensitive, I am not good at this, or I am not enough to have that, in that very moment, you are reaffirming the old frequency, and no matter how positive your surface actions may be, if the root identity remains unchanged, the energy you emit will still be the old one. You cannot build a new house on old, rotting foundations. Likewise, you cannot enter a higher state of consciousness while clinging to the identity stories that once gave you safety. Those stories may have helped you survive, may have justified your defenses, may have given you a sense of place, but they are no longer aligned with the frequency you are now calling in. You cannot invite the new while protecting the old. One of them will recede, and the law will never betray the stronger frequency. When you begin to dismantle the old identity, you may feel empty, like someone who has taken off familiar armor but is not yet used to the lightness. You may feel unsafe. You may feel as if you are betraying a part of yourself, but it is in that space of emptiness that the new frequency can be chosen, not by forcing it, but by living differently, by responding differently, by staying silent where you once screamed, by trusting where you once doubted, by acting as one who sees clearly, not as one who is merely trying. Freedom does not come from avoiding who you once were. It comes from looking at the old identity with gratitude and laying it down with clarity. It is no longer, I must remove this version of myself, but I choose not to sustain it. It is no longer, I hate who I was, but I no longer need it to survive. And it is only when you stop fighting the old and simply withdraw energy from it that the new identity begins to emerge as an open space, ready to be filled with conscious choice. The new frequency does not need you to become someone else. It only asks that you stop identifying with patterns that no longer fit. Each time you choose differently, a new connection is made in the mind. Each time you speak differently, a new signal is broadcast into the world. And each time you live as someone who sees clearly, that frequency begins to reweave the entire structure of your experience, not in a mystical way, but in a lawful one, as if the threads are being pulled out of the old fabric to create something new, not by effort, but by steady presence. Do not wait until you feel ready to choose the new frequency. It is the consistency of choice that creates the feeling of readiness. Readiness does not come before. It comes after your steadfastness. The more grounded you are in your new choice, the more your emotions will align, your body will recalibrate, and your reality will begin to move. But if you keep checking back, keep testing to see if the new is working, you have not yet withdrawn your energy from the old identity, and that slows the current, not because the law is broken, but because you are not yet single-minded. Identity is not fixed. It is a function of choice, and choice is the most sacred act you possess. Every day you are given the chance to choose again, not to deny the past, but to update the present. You are not who you once were. Unless you keep repeating the same story, and only when you stop retelling the old can the new story begin to write itself. Not by anyone else's hand, but by yours, as one who remembers you were never defined by pain, by circumstances, or by memory. You are the one who chooses the frequency, and each choice is an answer to the greater question. Do you still need the old, or are you ready to become the new life that has been waiting for you? You do not need to become someone else to live fully. You do not need to strive towards some higher self, complete a checklist of conditions, or earn worthiness in order to receive love, healing, or miracles. The wholeness you seek is not out there, not hidden at the end of a long journey, not the result of endless refinement. It has been present from the beginning, untouched, unbroken, unstealable. Every method, every path, every spiritual practice, if truly aligned, only points you back to where you have always been. The issue is not lack, the issue is forgetting. Humanity has been conditioned to believe that it is not enough, that it must reach, repère, wait, and strain to prove its worth. These beliefs create a loop in the mind where the ego constantly poses questions, doubts, and conditions, then strives to satisfy them as if wholeness were a prize to be earned. But the more you chase, the farther you drift, the harder you try to become, the more you lose your ground, because in truth, you are not the seeker, you are the starting point. When you become still enough, you will feel something that needs no explanation, a state that requires no embellishment with positive emotions, no adornment with sacred concepts, yet carries a quality of clarity as if you have known it before, lived it, remembered it, and now it does not come from the outside, but rises from the very place most forgotten within. Wholeness does not arrive like an explosion. It appears like an echo, not of the future, but of a primordial memory being recalled. You do not need to fix your being. You only need to correct your perception. Every distorted experience is the result of a distorted lens. When you see through eyes of fear, the world becomes dangerous. When you see through eyes of lack, life feels insufficient. When you see through guilt, the self is always under judgment. But if you change the lens, if you let go of the mask you mistook for truth, then truth begins to reveal itself without effort. And that truth was never missing. It is the foundation, the origin, the part of you that was never lost. No matter how far you wandered, the true self does not react. It does not panic when you make mistakes. It is not wounded by criticism. It does not collapse under adversity, because it is not built on conditions. It does not need to win to feel worthy. It does not need to be loved to feel whole. It is not fragile. It is not breakable. It is not the product of experience, but the ground before all experience. That is why when you pause in stillness, when you stop performing and let go of all roles, what remains is this: recognizing the already complete self within is not a lofty sensation, but a natural state, so undeniable you wonder how you ever forgot it. It does not speak human language. It needs no explanation. It shows up as a certainty that needs no validation. You no longer need to become better. You only need to become clearer, and that clarity dissolves doubt without defense. When you live from that self, your words become lighter, your actions more precise, and your presence becomes a natural medicine. Every true miracle does not come from begging. It comes from remembering who you are, then acting from that place. You no longer seek confirmation from the world. You are no longer driven by emotion. You are no longer dependent on success or failure, because your root has been planted in a soil that cannot be shaken, and once the root is secure, all else becomes surface expression. No longer able to control you, no rise or fall can break what has always been whole. Wholeness does not erase your past. It does not deny pain in your mistakes or delete memories. It includes all of it within a greater order. When you look back at your former self, you no longer ache. You simply see the layers that once protected the sacred, and now that you are strong enough, those layers can fall away. You no longer fight to prove yourself, right? You simply live as one who remembers, and from that place, all your actions become aligned. No effort needed. You do not need permission to live from your true self. You do not need to wait for some moment of enlightenment. You only need to agree that it is enough, that it is time to stop searching, time to return, time to live as if you have always known, always seen, always been whole. And from that agreement, there is nothing left to fix. Only one thing remains: to let your presence become the living expression of what has never been absent. This is not a goal. This is a return. No ceremony required. No miracle needed. Only a decision, a daily choice to never again leave that self. No performance. No recognition. Just the quiet living of a source returned to its flow. And in that return, you will realize that every answer has always been here, not to give you something new to know, but to help you remember, not to make you become, but to make you stop forgetting. And it is in that cessation of forgetting that the true self speaks, not to say something new, but to affirm what you have known all along. You were never lacking. You have simply just remembered the world you are living in does not begin on the outside. It begins within, not the room you are sitting in, not the people around you, not the situations unfolding around you. All of these are reflections. The true world, the first world, is always the mind. Every event that takes place is a form shaped by a wave that was first emitted from within. And because you have lived so long on the surface, you have forgotten where the real world is born. The mind is not just a container for thoughts. It is the atmosphere, the broadcasting space, the deeper layer of order that governs every expression you call life. When you think a thought, you are not merely forming an image. You are transmitting a frequency, and the universe does not respond to what you want, but to the frequency you emit. If you desire peace, but your mind is tuned to fear, what you will receive is a world constructed around that field of fear, not because you are wrong, not because the universe punishes, but because the law functions through reflection. What you see outside holds no authority over what comes next unless you allow it to imprint upon your mind. Your mind is not a victim. It is the author. If you receive a situation as something fixed, if you agree with the idea that you are limited, deprived, or trapped by specific conditions, then in that very moment, the mind begins building structures to sustain what you have agreed to, and the world will simply show up as evidence of what you have already declared to be true. But if you know that the mind is where everything begins, then you no longer need to wait for the outer world to change. To find hope, you return inward to the only place with the power to originate There is no fixed objective reality. There are different reflections programmed by different thought structures. One who lives in a sense of lack sees the world as scarce. One who lives in gratitude sees endless opportunity where others see walls. One who lives in guilt sees life as punishment. But one who lives in alignment sees divine order even in chaos, not because the world has changed, but because the axis of perception has shifted. When you understand that the mind is the first world, you no longer chase after outcomes. You no longer feel lost in situations that do not yet reflect your desires. You stop reacting to the outside world as if it is the cause. Instead, you return to the root. You begin choosing your thoughts again, not as an act of control, but as a centering, a remembering. You are not trying to create a positive vision. You are simply withdrawing agreement from faulty scripts. And from there, new structures begin to form. No pushing, no forcing, just correct choice, firmly held. The mind is not a battlefield. It is soil. If you plant fear in it, you will harvest limitation. If you sow unconscious thoughts, you will reap cycles that cannot be explained. But if you begin planting clarity, agreement with good, and images of a life moving in right direction, even without proof, you are renewing that soil, not by effort, but by honesty with what you truly believe. The mind does not need you to be strong. It needs you to be honest. And that honesty is the beginning of a new world. Change does not begin outside. It begins when you stop telling the same story, when you stop repeating old patterns of reaction, when you choose to see things through a different lens. That does not mean you deny what is happening. It means you refuse to define yourself by your circumstances. You may be facing challenge, but you no longer say, I am powerless. You may be navigating hardship, but you no longer see yourself as the victim. In the moment you rename yourself, you rewrite the wave pattern in your mind. And from there, the first world begins to be rewritten. The mind does not need to be completely purified to create change. It only needs to be reoriented to a new axis. You do not need to control every thought. You only need to let a new direction become the center, like a compass, realigning the flight path. Even if the plane does not turn immediately, the destination will certainly change. Once the axis shifts, and that shift does not come from strain, it comes from a decision, I will no longer think the old way. And when you hold that decision, you do not need immediate evidence. You do not need the world to respond right away to feel certain, because you know that if the real world lies within, all outer reflection is just an echo, and the echo always follows the original sound. You do not need to shout louder. You only need to be clearer. You do not need to grip harder. You only need to be stable in your choice. And the world will adjust, not because you forced it, but because you changed the origin point. Your mind is sacred ground. Everything is created there. Every reality is written from that place, and you are the only one who can decide what to plant there each day. No one else can do it for you. No circumstance can write on your behalf. And when you know you are standing at the beginning of every world, you will no longer live as someone caught in the current, but as one who creates it, quietly, steadily, yet with power. And that is true creation, where you no longer wait for miracles, because you have become the source of them. Emotion is not merely the result of experience. It is the very instrument through which you transmit signals to the entire structure of the universe. Every emotion is a living frequency, not lying dormant within you, but being broadcast, received, amplified, and reflected through the conditions you are living in. If you believe you are only feeling and not creating, that is one of the greatest forgettings. Every act of creation is first marked by emotion before form appears. You are not merely living your life, you are broadcasting it from within, and emotion is the most powerful way through which all things are shaped. You may think thousands of thoughts in your mind, but what the universe responds to is what you feel to be true. A person may say they believe in abundance, but if they still feel fear, tension, and insecurity whenever they think about money, then that feeling is the real declaration they are sending out. Emotion cannot lie. Emotion is the deepest code of faith, and everything you receive is merely a faithful reflection of the emotion you most consistently sustain. Not occasionally, not only when inspired, but where you dwell emotionally each day. Often in silence, emotion does not come to disturb you. It arrives as a map, as a guidance system revealing what state of the creative frequency you are currently in. When you feel calm, light, and harmonious, it means you are transmitting a signal in alignment with divine order. But when you feel resistance, fear, or rigidity, you are broadcasting an offbeat message. Do not blame the world. Do not demand reality to prove anything. Look instead at what you are feeling, not to judge, but to remember that emotion is the message you are sending to all of life. You do not need to feel perfect. You only need to be honest. If you are feeling fear, acknowledge it. Do not identify with it. Do not suppress it. Simply see it, then return to choose a different emotional state, not through force, but by asking a better question. What am I choosing to believe that causes this fear? What am I agreeing with that brings this heaviness? And if I want to live differently, how must I feel now? When you begin practicing emotional redirection through presence rather than reaction, you begin to rewire the inner circuitry of creation. Emotion does not need to be suppressed, nor does it need to be released carelessly. It needs to be clarified. Every emotion is a conversation between you and the law. When you feel anger, ask, what part of me feels hurt? When you feel anxiety, ask, what am I placing my faith in? And when you feel peace for no reason at all, recognize it as a sign that you are flowing with the right current, no validation needed, no outer condition to reinforce it. Just the recognition that this emotion is the core signal inviting the right form to draw near. Positive emotion is not a random state. It is a choice, the result of living from a correct belief. When you begin to trust in support, believe in sufficiency, believe that life is not against you, emotion shifts as a natural effect. No strain, no performance. And from that emotion, your voice changes, your gaze changes, your actions change, not because you are trying to improve, but because you have tapped into the healthy frequency within, and from there, your whole life begins to restructure. Emotion is the base frequency that gives your words power. It is the substance that animates your visualizations. It is the foundation from which prayer is answered, not because you said the right phrase, but because you lived the right state, not because you followed the formula, but because you lived as though what you chose was already true. And that is the most powerful declaration. No shouting, no explanation, just presence. And emotion is the gauge of how truthful that presence really is. You do not need to wait for circumstances to change in order to feel different. You are invited to feel first, so that circumstances may align in response. You do not need anyone to make you happy. You have been given the power to live from joy as a natural climate, as a reflex of one who knows who they are. And when you live as though you have already heard, already received, then every cell, every decision, every action will begin to reflect that frequency into the world. Not from distance, but from alignment. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to, and emotion is the road that leads you to that space. No need to search out there, no need to prove anything. You only need to be still enough to listen to the emotion that is already speaking. And when you listen long enough, you will realize you were never disconnected from the current of creation. You only needed to choose your frequency again. And from that moment, everything begins to unfold as a gentle response from the law, offered to the one who has chosen to live in truth. When you truly desire something to manifest in your life, the first step is not external action, but relocating your dwelling to an inner state. For your true home is not the place where your body resides, but the space where your emotions live. You may dwell in a spacious apartment and still reside in fear. You may walk city streets yet inhabit helplessness. You may speak positive words yet return each day to a mindset of lack. Every action will remain surface level if your mind is still closed off to the state you long for. Relocating does not mean changing your physical surroundings. It is the shift in where you anchor your energy. It is the decision to re-establish your emotional frequency, as if what you want has already come to pass. If you long for healing, but remain rooted in the identity of the unwell, then all your outgoing signals still belong to someone not yet whole. If you desire a fulfilling relationship, but continue to think as one who has been hurt, then your foundation is still built on fear. No matter how much effort you exert, the outcome will always mirror the frequency you live in. Living as though you have already received is not pretense. It is the alignment of your perception with the true seat of creation. It is living from the outcome, not toward it. When you relocate your inner home to the chosen state, you begin to think as one who already has, feel as one who has already seen, act as one who has already entered, not once in a while, but every day, in each small decision, every word spoken, every reaction or team, your entire nervous system, your whole perceptual field will rewire itself to match the new state. You cannot remain identified with the old and simultaneously enter the new. You cannot cling to past patterns of reaction and expect present conditions to transform the way you speak, the way you think, the way you hold your mind in the quiet of morning or the stillness of night. All of it reveals where you live. And if you wish to change that dwelling, you must leave the old emotional neighborhood, not because of external proof, but through agreement with a higher truth. Relocating your inner home is not delusion. It is the mind's confirmation that what is new already exists in the unseen. You do not need to see it with your eyes to believe. You must sense it with your intuition to live from it. What the eyes perceive comes later, but emotion is the fastest mover of home. Each time you live as if it is already so, you lay a new foundation. And if you remain consistent in that choice, nothing can stop the stream of creation from rooting into the realm of form. The greatest danger is not that you will not achieve what you desire. It is that you continue living as if you have never had it. That keeps you trapped in an invisible loop. You may read books, pray, visualize, but if your heart has not relocated, then every effort is merely resistance to the present, rather than cooperation with the already real future. Once you realize this, you will no longer focus on demanding results. You will focus on holding the state, for from the state, all things begin Some people change their entire lives not because they do something dramatic, but because they begin living each day as someone who has already heard, already received. Their voice changes, their eyes shift, their steps become steadier, not because the world changes first, but because they left the old house in their mind, and from there, reality has no reason to delay transformation. The outer world cannot help but change. When the inner axis has turned, nothing can last unless it is built on the foundation of a correct emotional base. And nothing will remain if it was constructed out of fear. The new home you need is a state, not an address. It is a place where you dwell in clarity, gratitude, and stability, even when no physical evidence supports it. It is where you say thank you for what has been given, not because you have seen it, but because you are living from it. And from that thankfulness, you have opened the door, you have activated the signal, you have sent a clear invitation to all of life. No one can relocate for you. No teaching can create the right state unless you truly live from it. But once you have left the old mental house, you no longer need to speak much. Everything in you will speak on your behalf. The frequency you emit will do its work. No pushing, no repeating, just steadiness, just loyalty to the chosen state. And that alone will redraw your entire map from your inner atmosphere to your outer conditions as a response from the law to one who knows exactly where they are living. Do not call delay divine. Have you ever wondered whether you are postponing your true life simply by labeling your delay as something sacred? Have you been telling yourself for far too long that you are waiting for the right time, while in truth you are deferring the answer to your soul's calling? Are you still sitting at the threshold of a door that has already been opened simply because you have grown familiar with the shade of safety? This question is not meant to judge, but to invite you to see clearly one thing, that delay, no matter how beautifully it is dressed in words, cannot become light if its root is fear. Delay does not automatically carry the quality of the sacred. The sacred always moves in silence, but that does not mean stillness. Yes, there are times when waiting is needed so that the mind may recalibrate, but there are also many moments when delay is nothing more than a lack of courage in disguise. There are souls who have heard the calling, who have received the signs, who know precisely where they are being invited to step into, yet they remain where they are, claiming they're not ready, and so they learn to rationalize fear. They say the timing is not yet right. They say they are waiting for the universe to arrange things. They say God's will has not yet been revealed, while in truth, God is already standing on the other side of the door, gently knocking. Wisdom does not lie in endless stillness, but in the ability to discern, is this the voice of intuition or the voice of fear coated in sweetness? You may see all the signs, you may hear all the guidance, but if you do not act from it, all that guidance becomes meaningless. There is no shortage of light, there is no lack of grace, there is only your reluctance to leave the familiar shore. Many people spend their entire lives preserving elegant reasons to delay. They read one more book, wait for another confirmation, ask for one more reassurance, perform one more ritual, and in doing so, they postpone the embodiment of something they have already been given. But you do not need to be perfect to begin. You only need to be honest. You do not need to know everything. You only need to be clear enough to take one step from where you stand now, even if it is just one small step, so long as it is real. That act alone is the greatest agreement you can send to the universe. Do not glorify standing still. Do not dress hesitation in the clothing of faith. True faith does not require proof, nor does it need more time to feel certain. True faith moves in the now. The moment the mind chooses a higher truth and behaves as though it is already real, if you keep waiting until you feel right to move, you are allowing temporary emotion to lead you. But if you choose to live from the state that has already been taught to you within, your emotions will adjust to the new belief you have chosen. The world does not change because you waited long enough. It changes when you stop agreeing with your old image of yourself, when you stop calling the loop your unfinished mission, when you stop placing doubt on the throne, when you stop postponing the answer to what has long been knocking on the door of your heart. No one can live for you. No one can walk in your place. All miracles truly begin the moment you step forward, even if your hands tremble, even if you are unsure, even if you are only beginning to understand. You are not lacking in signs. You are not short on guidance. You only need to decide that you will no longer use delay to deny what you have already seen. No one ever enters a great journey when they are completely ready. They walk forward when their clarity becomes louder than their fear. They walk not because fear has disappeared, but because they have heard the call enough to know that if they do not move, they are stepping away from their truest self. And just one act of stepping forward like that is enough to cause the entire structure of life to begin to shift. So ask yourself, what am I postponing that I already know is right? What embodiment am I holding back because I believe I am not enough? What miracle am I still waiting for to confirm what I have known all along? And if I choose to move today, even with just one small act, what might begin to change? These questions are not meant to be answered with words, but with the way you live the hours to come. If you are still listening, perhaps this is not an accident. Perhaps it is time to stop asking the universe when your desire will arrive and begin asking, when will I be ready to receive it? You do not need another sign. For if you are still here, still listening to this moment, that is the sign. And if something inside you is nodding, let that become a real act. However small, however silent, but real. Thank you for being here, for listening not only with your ears, but with your heart. If you have felt something in this, leave a word in silence for yourself, or simply nod within as a sacred commitment, not to me, but to yourself, to life, to the truth you have known all along. And remember, grace never delays. It only waits for you to stop delaying yourself. To refuse inner conflict is to preserve the very foundation of creation. It is not the outer world that breaks your dream, but the inner inconsistency between what you say, what you think, and what you feel when one part of you longs to move forward, while another clings to the old identity. You do not merely create emotional tension. You disrupt the energetic flow between you and the reality you are reaching for. Every internal conflict emits a frequency of confusion, and that frequency cannot produce clarity of form. It only multiplies disorder. You cannot build a new world on the fractured ground of a divided mind. If in your heart you still doubt the very thing you pray for, if your voice trembles between trust and fear, the message you send out is mixed, and the Lord does not respond to what you wish for, but to the clearest signal you emit. If you say, I am ready to receive what is good, but deep within still carry the feeling of unworthiness, then that very inconsistency becomes the blockade. It is not the world that is rejecting you. It is you rejecting yourself through invisible hesitation. To refuse inner conflict is the most radical act of spiritual maturity, not because you never doubt again, but because you no longer let doubt take the central seat in your mind. You begin to distinguish between the voice of truth and the reflex of old wounds. You no longer allow past memories to author your new story. You no longer let lack determine the frequency of your tomorrow, and from there you bring yourself into harmony, not through force, but through clarity. Clarity is the lamp that releases you from the gray zone. It is the state where you no longer need to ask if something can happen, because your faith has been repositioned in clarity. You no longer act from a need to prove, but from a natural sense that you are living from what is right. And in that very rightness, all conflict begins to dissolve. For conflict can only exist where doubt remains. When you stop doubting, you stop tearing yourself into pieces. Every time you allow hesitation to linger, you delay the unification of your inner power. Every time you let contradictory voices within drown out the call of your soul, you trade true freedom for a familiar cage. But you cannot fly if one wing is still buried in the ground. You cannot be reborn if half of you still wears the mourning clothes of the past. And you cannot become someone new if you are still thinking in the language of the old self. Inner conflict often disguises itself as caution, thoroughness, or rational delay, but beneath that layer lies a deeper truth, a lack of courage to fully choose. And when you do not choose, you cannot move, for to move is not merely an external act, but a decisive shift in consciousness. It is when you stop listening to the voice that pulls you back, not out of hatred, but because you have seen clearly which path is true. And once the choice is clear, you need not argue further. You live from the place you have chosen with full inner alignment to refuse the inner conflict. You do not have to fight your own paths. You simply need to name them, distinguish them, and ask again, what serves the frequency I've chosen? What arises from fear and what arises from remembrance? And from there, you stop feeding the false voice with attention. You stop pouring oil into the lamp of doubt. You keep the light only where it is clearest. And slowly, consistency becomes your inner climate. True strength is not in never feeling shaken, but in knowing how to return to clarity. The fastest, it is the ability to gather yourself when you feel scattered, to pull your awareness back to one single point of light. And that light is not some lofty ideal, but a simple truth. You are being guided, you are not lacking, and you are capable of living from what has already been given. When you live from this truth, all other voices will dissolve on their own. Your mind does not need to entertain all possibilities. It only needs to remain loyal to one truth. And that loyalty does not come from emotion, but from choice. The choice that even though nothing outside may yet look complete, I still live from a place of wholeness. Even if no one understands, I walk like one who sees. Even if no one confirms, I remain unmoved, because what matters is not who agrees with you, but whether you have come into agreement with yourself. When you refuse inner conflict, you do not merely heal the mind, you open the channel for the highest frequencies to flow smoothly. No more static, no more misalignment, only a field of pure energy where everything you send forth is consistent with what you have truly chosen. And from that place, true creation begins. No more repeating the past, no more convincing, only the act of living as a revealed truth. No noise, no struggle, just a state of clarity where you and what you are reaching for have already become one. A miracle does not require time, only consistency. A miracle does not happen because time has passed. It happens the moment you become aligned with a truth deep enough that your energy no longer leaks through doubt, fear, or comparison. You do not need to wait years. You do not need to go through more trials to prove anything. A miracle does not operate according to chronology, but by the purity of the frequency you sustain when your thoughts, emotions, and actions are in harmony, reality has no choice but to recalibrate in response. Time does not heal. Only a shift in inner state can do that. Some people break free from cycles in a year. Others remain stuck in the same pattern for 10. Not because of circumstances, but because their chosen frequency has not changed. They live with the belief that at the right time, good will come, but the right time is not written in the past. It is found in the present. The miraculous does not arrive because you waited long enough, but because you stop sending mixed signals, you stop wondering whether it will happen and begin living as if it already is. Delay does not come from the world, but from inner misalignment. When your mind chooses one thing, but your heart hesitates, when your actions move toward a goal, but your frequency reflects anxiety, the universe can only respond to the inconsistency by returning echoing patterns. To shift reality, you do not need to do more, only to become clearer. A single moment of true inner clarity has the power to move space itself. A deep enough consistency can collapse time. That is the essence of a miracle. A miracle does not come from the outside. It begins the moment you stop measuring reality with physical eyes and start measuring it by how well you maintain alignment with what you have chosen. People often ask when they will see results, but that is the question of someone still standing outside the miracle. Those who have stepped in no longer count days. They live in the rhythm of already seeing, already enough, already being. And in that rhythm, alignment unfolds naturally like light at the break of dawn. Do not believe you must prove your faith through endurance. True endurance is not measured by how many days you waited, but by how many moments you held your frequency steady, even when nothing seemed to happen. People say, have faith until the end, but faith is not repeating affirmations to convince yourself. Faith is living as if there is nothing left to prove. It is not the act of resisting doubt, but a state where you no longer need to check. You know, you are settled and you move in silence from that knowing. This is the power of the voice within, not merely a voice you hear, but the space you return to. When you live in consistency long enough, you no longer need to say anything. Your energy becomes the message. Your presence becomes a signal sent clearly to the entire structure of creation that says, I have remembered. I am no longer waiting. I'm no longer testing. I am, and from that being, you no longer need a miracle. You are the miracle in living form. Those who do not understand the law will always ask why goodness has not yet come. But those who live in the law know as long as you continue to send out signals of doubt, the universe will love you enough to return exactly what you are emitting. The law does not punish. The law does not delay. The law is precise, and it is that precision that makes it sacred. When you understand this, you stop asking why it is taking so long, and instead ask, how many minutes today did I remain clear? Am I transmitting the same frequency from morning to night? Or am I letting emotion and circumstances knock me off rhythm? A miracle is not something you summon with a grand act. It is something you sustain through small choices, a thought that does not betray your chosen truth, an emotion that does not slip from its center, an action that does not veer from your inner direction. Each of these details, when sustained with awareness, accumulates and begins to bend space and time, and suddenly what you thought would take years may appear within a single quiet morning. You do not need to do more. You only need to be clearer, not to walk faster, but to walk without deviation, not to speed up, but to stop changing direction halfway. And then you will see Every miracle has always waited at one single point. The moment you become entirely aligned with what you have chosen, no stopping to check, no turning due to doubt, no rushing due to impatience, just walking from a place undivided. That is the moment time collapses, and the miraculous reveals itself not because you are more worthy than others, but because you have stopped tearing yourself into fragments. And when you become one integrated presence, the world cannot help but respond. For a miracle does not need time, only a vessel that no longer leaks. And in that very moment, you are no longer the one praying. You are the prayer made manifest from imitation to embodiment. Imitation is the beginning of all transformation. When the mind is not yet steady enough to sustain a new state, we begin by imitating the feelings, attitudes, and choices of the version we are becoming, like a child tracing letters before learning to write. The soul needs a safe space to grow familiar with a new frequency, but imitation cannot last forever. It is only a bridge. If you stay too long in the space of imitation, you begin to operate from lack rather than identity. Everyone plays a role to learn how to live a new one, but what sets you apart is the moment you stop performing and start becoming. Embodiment is not about acting better. It is when there is no longer a gap between what you live and what you believe, when you no longer repeat affirmations to calm yourself, when your actions, words, and presence are no longer tools to prove anything, but the natural result of a state already integrated. You know you have left the space of imitation when you no longer need an audience. When you do not need the world's approval to maintain your emotional state, when you no longer adjust yourself according to outside reactions, but live as the original signal, letting the world adjust to you, embodiment does not begin with a decision, but with the falling away of all performance. It is not about adding more, but about removing, not about learning more, but about no longer pretending to not know. To become what you have chosen, you must pass through the phase where everything still feels loose. The feelings are not fully real yet. The outer world has not yet confirmed anything. The same tests still repeat, and in that very stage, you are asked to walk as if the new is already established, even while the old mind pulls at you. This is the true test, not because life is hard, but because you must stay consistent even when nothing outside reflects what you believe. You must choose the new frequency, even when the old one still calls powerfully. Imitating the new is not wrong. It is necessary, like softening the walls of old beliefs, but you cannot build a sustainable reality if you are always pretending. The dissonance between what you imitate and what you truly believe creates conflict, and that conflict is what keeps you swinging between faith and doubt, between excitement and exhaustion, between feeling forward and falling back. That is the urgent call for you to stop acting and start living. Embodiment does not mean becoming perfect by old definitions. It simply means becoming transparent. No more masks, no more emotional manipulation, no more seeking confirmation. You begin to act from a place of clarity, clarity about who you are, what you have chosen, and why you are here. And that clarity becomes a magnetic field, drawing everything necessary for your new path. No rush, no force, just holding the frequency steady enough for reality to shape around it. From imitation to embodiment is the journey of moving from borrowing another's voice to reclaiming your own soul's tone, from repeating affirmations to living as if the words have taken form, from asking the world whether you are worthy to showing the world your worth through your ordinary rhythm of life, not through banners, but through presence, not through excitement. but through a deep and steady stillness. There is a sacred moment when you look back and realize you have crossed the threshold, that you are no longer trying to live by a new belief, but simply living, no longer trying to believe you are enough, but operating as one who has always known, no longer hoping to be understood, but becoming a living testament that truth needs no defense. And in that moment, you are embodied. Embodiment does not make you louder. It makes you clearer. No need to raise your voice. No need to explain. Just live, move, act, decide, love, and create from the same frequency. This coherence does not come from technique, but from the moment you stop trading your essence for acceptance, you stop playing between light and shadow, you stop experimenting and begin to live as if the most sacred has become your everyday climate. You are not called to imitate the divine, but to embody it in daily life, not in moments of elevation, but in small choices, not on stage, but in the kitchen, at work, in your gaze, in the way you listen. When you embody, you no longer need faith to hold your state. The state becomes living faith, and from there, you stop seeking miracles because you have become the place where they reveal themselves most naturally. Freedom is the end of justifying the old self. Freedom does not begin by breaking outer chains, but with the most silent act of all, the refusal to keep justifying your old self. Every time you explain why you have not changed, why you still react in the same patterns, why circumstances have not yet aligned, you are renewing the contract with an outdated version of yourself. You are not held captive by the world. You are held back by the arguments you use to defend a pattern that is no longer needed. And only when you stop justifying do you allow yourself to step into a new identity. No one is forcing you to live small. It is the rationalization of the mind that keeps you in the safe zone. Words like "I have tried," "this is just who I am," "I am not ready," "I need more time," are all expressions of an ego that does not want to dissolve. It does not want to die. It wants to survive under the mask of understanding and kindness, but deep down, it fears change, because true change does not let you carry reasons. It only lets you carry truth. And the truth is, you have always had the power to choose again. Every moment is an opportunity to shift into a new frequency. But if you still feel the need to explain, it means you are still holding on to the old image. One who is truly free does not need to prove they are right, worthy, or that they have tried hard enough. They simply live. They do not need to speak for the past. They let the present speak on their behalf. Their presence is clear enough that no explanation is required. Freedom begins when you no longer explain to others why you are the way you are. And more importantly, when you no longer explain it to yourself, every time you retell the old story in a defensive tone, you freeze yourself in a version that no longer aligns with the light you are calling in. Instead of moving forward, you pull yourself back with the repeated scripts of unresolved fear and shame. Transformation does not require you to defeat the old self. It only requires you to stop serving it. Every excuse you use to delay, to protect, to avoid stepping into the new, is a signal that you are still afraid of losing something, but nothing real is ever lost. Only the false is stripped away, and the real is allowed to emerge. No need for complication, no need for noise, only the decision to become quiet in the mind and stop defending what is past. You do not need to let go of the old self in a grand ceremony. You only need to refuse cooperation with the thoughts that have delayed you. When the mind rises to find a reason, Let it pass like a cloud, with no need to grasp it, no need to argue. Freedom does not come from convincing the ego that change makes sense. It comes when you stop bargaining with it. You no longer want reasons. You want results, and you live as if the result has already happened. The one who still justifies is the one who still does not fully believe. The one who still retells the journey is the one who has not fully arrived. You do not need to tell anyone how hard you have tried. That truth will be revealed in your eyes, your voice, your presence. One who has truly left the dark does not speak of darkness to find sympathy. They simply carry the light, and those who have walked in the dark will recognize it without words. Only when you stop defending the old self do you make space for the new. You cannot hold the image of a victim and live as a victor. You cannot call in the new while clinging to the old habits of defense. Clarity comes when you choose one thing and reject all the rest. No negotiation, no delay, no ambiguity. Freedom does not come from the world accepting you. It comes from no longer needing that acceptance in order to live in what you know is true. You stop retelling the old story as a shield. You live with a wholeness that needs no condition. And in that act alone, you declare, I am enough, not enough to be forgiven, but enough to move forward without permission. You do not need to be perfect to embody the sacred. You only need to be honest. Honest enough to no longer hide behind any excuse. No need for spiritual titles. No need to repeat self-help slogans. Just live from a place where there is nothing left to defend, nothing left to protect. And from that space, you become real, not because you achieved something, but because you stop trying to become someone else. Freedom is the moment you stop battling the old version of you. No more fixing, no more healing as a duty. You simply live from a place where all the pieces have returned to center. No more asking whether you are worthy. No more checking if the new is arriving. Only a stillness, steady and pure, that causes everything else to align itself around you. And that is the sign that you have stepped out of justification. You are living as one who has been set free, and you no longer need anyone to confirm it. If you have journeyed through all 16 parts to this final moment, then you are no longer the same person you once were, not because you have learned something new, but because you have remembered something that was never lost. Freedom does not lie in changing circumstances, but in the choice to no longer justify the old self. You no longer need permission to live in alignment with your divine nature. You do not need the world's approval, favorable conditions, or emotional highs. You only need clarity and to walk forward as one who has seen, who has remembered, and who has chosen. This is not the end. This is the doorway into a new rhythm of life, where light is no longer something you seek, but the climate you live in every day.